Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick around for a few seconds and I'll tell you what these 7 people have in common.
Okay, so we're back. So tell us, what do these 7 people have in common?
I'm going to save that for the end. I'm going to explain to you what these 7 people have in common. Do you recognize any of the names?
Sure, they're Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and Robert Redford. Those all go together.
All right. So let me take you off on a little adventure here. But first, what I want to do is I want to play a clip from Moby Dickens, which took place, the interview or the presentation took place in November of 2013. This, of course, is Forrest Fenn, and we're going to talk about his flying habits.
I used to tell a story in my Too Far to Walk book about in Santa Fe I had a Piper Malibu Mirage. It carried lots of fuel. It had a 43-foot wingspan, and I could go out there all by myself, push the hangar doors open because I didn't want anybody to help me, crank that airplane up, get permission from the tower to take off, and head north and then turn my radios off. I had no idea where I was going to land, what I was going to see. I didn't even care. I had 600 or 700 miles before I had to think about that. But I had GPS and I had maps. I'd find a little town up in Wyoming or Idaho or someplace in Montana and look on my map, see if they had a rental car or an airport. If they did, I'd land and rent a car and go out and sit by the lake or the river. I did that. I tell a story about that in, I think it's Lander, Wyoming. The little Popo Aggie River runs through Lander. How can you not stop where the little Popo Aggie River runs through a town?
My best friend who passed away here a couple of months ago, she lived in Lander.
She lived in Lander?
Yeah.
I've been to Lander a few times. It's a typical little town. I mean, you have to love Lander. I mean, that's grassroots America.
So that was his trip to Lander, Wyoming.
Right.
And I think what was interesting about that part of this conversation is that he mentioned he had been to Lander a few times, a few being not one, but not many more than 2.
And he also mentioned that he wrote about the same story here in Too Far to Walk. It's
That's right.
in the chapter 39 called Heading North. And we took a look at that chapter and pulled out some of the more important information out of that chapter that he was talking about.
Right. It covers the territory, the same territory, and with a little bit more detail than he did at Moby Dickens. So these are the important details. Number 1, it's in Too Far to Walk. It's chapter 39 on pages 210, 212. It's called Heading North. He says he gets in his airplane and he heads north from Santa Fe. His aircraft has approximately a 600-mile range. That Piper Malibu Mirage is a turboprop. Carries up to 6 people, I think, including the pilot and co-pilot. It's a pretty nifty little aircraft. It's the one he sold for $700,000. That's why it sold for $700,000. He rented a car in the story. He rents a car in Lander from a 14-year-old Avis rental car agent, invites him to go along with him. They head out for the
Popoja,
that's right. Fenn calls it the Popo Aggie River. It is actually the Popoja River. It is a Crow name, and it means gurgling stream. So they visit the Popoja River. They in the next day
and found arrowheads.
That's right. He did find arrowheads, which is amazing because I go all over New Mexico.
He knows what he's looking for. That makes a big difference.
I need to look down more, I guess. I don't know.
Well, sometimes they just look like rocks. You got to know what you're looking for.
True. So the following day he visits Cody. He says a few years later that was good because a few years later, not 1, but not many more than 2, he joins the Cody Museum on their board of directors.
Right.
And he says in the book, I don't remember any 4 days that I enjoyed more.
And that's a pretty big statement because he has 2 daughters and a wife. You know, he got married, day the babies were born, things of that nature. But these 4 days, boy.
Pretty big. I mean, I can tell you my favorite 4 days, and I'd have to bring up Las Vegas, I suppose.
Okay.
So let's go back and rebuild that trip for him. Okay. So, but there was one more thing.
Oh, yeah. This was important because recently we posted the Collected Works video on the Gypsy Kiss YouTube channel, and I watched it again, and something jumped out at me, and I've been haranguing you ever since. Let's talk about this. I need to say something about this. We need to focus on this. So finally we're here. The day is now here. So I want you to watch this clip and get the excitement that I got when I saw it.
It's pretty short, but it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
If a person reads the poem over and over and are able to decipher the first few clues in the poem, they can find a treasure chest. It may not be easy, but it certainly isn't impossible. I could go right straight to it.
Amazing. Man has incredible power.
You're so easy.
Would you take a partner along?
Would you take a partner along when you go to it?
Do you have an airplane?
I've got my bushwhacker.
Do you have an airplane?
I don't have an airplane, and I would have to rent one and recertify my PPL if we wanted to do anything with it. But it was an interesting question. I thought at first it was Stephanie that was asking the question. It wasn't. It was somebody else. She seemed to have a slight accent, a more New Mexico accent. So I don't actually know who asked him the question. But it was an interesting.
Of course,
and it
they're
was
in Santa Fe here.
Right.
So they must need an airplane to get to the treasure.
There you go. That was done in October of 2013. And what interested me with it is he was very quick with his answer. I mean, it was very, it sounded like he had used that answer before, like he'd heard that question before or something similar to it and had used that answer before. So let's go back and let's take that trip out of Too Far to Walk and look at it on the map. So the first part of the trip took place on day 1. He flew Santa Fe to Lander, Wyoming. Now, this doesn't exactly show the polar route. I didn't put the curves in it, but it's a flight distance, as the crow flies, of about 516 miles. So he's right at the edge of his 600-mile range. So the first thing he would do is he would top off, at least maybe the next day. So he rents a car. He and the young Avis rental agent take off for the Paposia. They hunt for arrowheads. And now he's got a river well known for its trout fishing, kind of in an interesting area of Wyoming. And it's got a Native American influence. A lot of the things that we look for in our home of Brown,
And it looks like it's a nice little forested area. You've got a bit of the Rocky Mountains in that area.
Yeah, it's definitely Rocky Mountain from there. And we're going to talk about that more in a future show. I'll tell you more about it. So the next day, he gets up. He tops off, again, because he's at the limits of his 600-mile range, and he flies Lander to Cody.
Right.
And he mentions that at that point, that in a few years later, he becomes a member of the Cody Museum.
Right. He was visiting the museum on that trip and then later became a board member.
Now, remember, this trip was made alone.
Right. And we also looked up the year he became a board member was 2003.
We're going to look at that timeline in just a minute.
Okay.
So it all fits together. Day 3, and this is where it gets hypothetical because he said he traveled. It was his favorite 4 days.
Right.
So on day 3, the hypothetical part is he flies back Cody to Lander. This time he rents a car, but he doesn't take the 14-year-old with him. This time he rents a car, takes the treasure, drives the car over to his aircraft on the flight line, unloads the treasure, puts it in the rental car, the sedan, right? Heads for the place that he wanted to hide the treasure. It's got arrowheads, it's got fishing, it's got all of these things. Hides the treasure, 2 trips, right? Hides the box, hides the treasure, drives back, returns the car, finds a nice hotel in Lander. I highly recommend the Holiday Inn Express. Then on day 4, he again tops off because he's got that 516 miles, and any
Right.
good pilot is going to top off and make sure he's got a full tank before he
Unless
travels.
he did it the day before, in which case
Either way.
he's got a full tank.
That's right. He's
One
got
way
a
or
full
another.
tank of gas, and he flies back to Santa Fe, New Mexico. The best 4 days of his life.
Well, the ones he's enjoyed the most, he
Right.
said. I
Yeah.
don't know if you...
Yeah,
Can say this-
I can say that. The Las
Yeah.
Vegas wasn't the best 4 days of my life.
Right.
But it was.
Because if you asked him what was the best day of your life, he may have said the day I got married.
Exactly. Or the day my
he
daughters
can't
were born.
remember the days he enjoyed more.
Right.
Being on his own, he was on his own, things that he enjoyed for himself.
So let's take all of that information and put it in the context of what I call the Fenn timeline.
Okay.
All right. Starting in 1972, Fenn arrives in Santa Fe. He's
Mm-hmm.
quiet, building a business. In 1981, he writes his first book, the one on Leon Gaspard.
Mm-hmm.
In 1983, he writes a second book, just a little bit more detailed, a little bit more substantive, on the artwork of Joseph Henry Sharp. 1985, Eric Sloan dies. 1987, his father dies, and he acquires San Lazaro Pueblo. 1988, he's diagnosed with cancer. So that period, 85 to 88, is pretty significant for him. I refer to this period as the quiet years because you don't hear much about him. He doesn't pop up in the historical references.
Well, I just read something recently, the Sunday morning article, and basically it said they were talking to Douglas Preston about these years, and Fenn was looking for somebody to write his biography. Because he wanted to hide the treasure. He had the treasure. He knew what he wanted to put into the poem as clues, but he wanted somebody else, an author, to write his biography for him. So
Not
was
believing
kind of
he could do it himself.
On the lookout for somebody like that, Preston being one of them.
So we have concluded prior to this that these were the years in which the treasure was being developed, the poem was being written, et cetera, et cetera. In 2001, he finally gets busy again. He writes the book on Nikolai Fetchin. In 2002, 2003, he sells his plane. And in 2003, we first see him in the annual report of the Cody Museum as one of the members. He says he took the lander flight a few years before he joined the museum. That would put that flight in the 2001-2003 timeframe.
Right.
Then he gets really busy. He writes his book on San Lazaro after all of this period of research. And then almost every 3 years after that, we see another book. 07, we see 3 books. The one on Native American dolls, the $17 a square inch, and a second book on Sharp, where he brings some new material into the context. I am willing to bet that there are hints to the location of the treasure in those 3 books.
You think?
Yes. An indication that it was hidden back here and not there. 2010, he writes The Thrill of the Chase, 2013. So every 3 years after he joins the Cody Museum, starting with San Lazaro in 2004, he publishes another book. It seems to me that what we have at this point is a man effectively with the load of this period, starting in 85 all the way to 2002 when he sells the aircraft. That's a man with a load off his mind so that he can focus on things like being a board of directors member of the Cody Museum, San Lazaro Pueblo, the dolls, all the books
One of the
between now and
quotes
then.
I read today, he said he doesn't like to do anything for more than 15 years.
I don't know why he keeps using that. There's something
I
about the whole
know,
15.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, if he made that trip to Cody, and now in 2003 he's a member of the board of directors, the trip from Cody to Lander is 2 hours and 45 minutes
By driving.
by driving, because he doesn't have an airplane anymore.
Car.
And he's up there once a year for the annual board meeting, at least once a year. So now he has an opportunity to go out and check to see if the treasure is still in its place.
Should he want to do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Hasn't written a book, hasn't published the poem, et cetera, but the treasure is in place. So, what do these people have in common?
They're all men.
Well, I guess they are. I certainly can't argue that point.
What do they have in common?
What they have in common is that in one way or the other, they are all referred to in the thrill of the chase.
Okay, let's go back and look at them again and see. So, John Charles Fremont.
John Charles of the Olive Jar. Fremont was a plainsman or a frontiersman and a trapper in the same era as Osborne Russell.
Joseph Meek.
Joseph Meek is in the poem. He's also a contemporary, and if you look at one of the volumes, one of the publications in which Osborne Russell's Journals of a Trapper are, there's a picture, a painting. The painting on the cover of that is Joseph Meek.
Joseph Meek. And you say he's in the poem.
He's in the poem, No Place for the Meek.
No Place for the Meek. Osborne Russell.
He was chased by Indians. That's why it's No Place for the Meek.
Oh.
Osborne Russell, Journal of a Trapper, appears more than once in The Thrill of the Chase.
Right.
Admired by Fenn, would love to have lived in the same era, and mentions him as one of the books that when he wants to relax, he reads that book.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember Robert Redford because he said if Robert Redford had written anything, and then, of course, in a previous episode, we talked about Robert Redford had written The Outlaw Trail, where he went on horseback and parts of it on truck to check out the Outlaw Trail, where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid had ridden with the Hole in the Wall gang and all of them. So I'm going to guess they're all connected.
The Hole in the Wall of the Hole in the Wall gang is just north and west of Lander, Wyoming. Lander is interesting because there is some historical precedence for implying that Butch Cassidy spent the remaining years of his life in Lander, Wyoming after he was supposedly killed in Bolivia.
So where does that come from?
That came from a man who was he was a computer technician, but he took an interest in it because he accidentally interviewed a gentleman whose name I'll never remember. It's like Alla Het or Het Alla, something like that, who was the last person. He was an older man when he interviewed him. He was the last person to have actually known Butch Cassidy when he lived in Lander.
Okay. So they are all mentioned in The Thrill of the Chase, or referred to in The Thrill of the Chase.
They are all connected to The Thrill of the Chase.
There were other people in there too. Why are you singling out these
Because
people?
all of these guys had one other thing in common, and that is they have all crossed the Paposia River.
It's pretty.
It's a beautiful area. That's the area referred to as the Sinks, where the Paposia River disappears into the mountainside and reappears 2 hours later, which shouldn't take it that long, so it does some other things, and a couple of degrees warmer.
I wonder what's going on in there.
I don't know, but it's heated up.
So they all crossed the Paposia
Yeah.
River. All of those people who were also mentioned in The Thrill of the Chase.
They would have had to, especially the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, if you were going from Hole in the Wall to Brown's Hole in, is it Colorado or Utah? It's Utah, right? Brown's Hole.
It's
on the border?
Yeah, it's on the border, Colorado.
You would have to cross the Paposia River to make that trip. Also, Robert Redford, the trail of the Outlaw Trail that he followed, as well as the Outlaw Trail, passes right through Lander and right over the Paposia River. One of the branches of the Paposia River. So it's an important place.
Yes, it is. So what does this all mean? How are you putting all this together?
Well, actually, it means two things. There's good news, and the good news is it validates our theory that Fenn hid the treasure before 2003, which changes and gives us our bad news.
Which is?
Our bad news is that although this validates our theory that Fenn hid the treasure before 2003, it invalidates our theory that the treasure must be in New Mexico. There is a chance now that the treasure is not in New Mexico.
Okay, well, you know, we knew this might happen. We're coming at this as scientists with a hypothesis, and you can always focus on what Marcel Proust said, which is the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but seeing with new eyes. And I hope that we will see you next time on A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice, and I don't care if I see you next week or not.
well, who knows? You might be in Lander.
Now there's a thought.